Hello, I'm Tom Lavin. Recently, we gave a presentation at the Nevada State Board of Nursing, their 2012 Behavioral Health Conference. My lecture was on When Life Hurts, how a sense of meaning can provide strength and direction, and we focused specifically on acceptance and commitment therapy and logotherapy. My talk needed to be cut short because of time constraints, and so you'll see in the beginning part of the presentation that it is at St. Mary's Hospital with over 100 nurses and social workers in attendance. Then later you'll see that specifically here in the Mark I studios, we are interjecting some of the material specifically about creative values, experiential values, and certain aspects of acceptance and commitment therapy. Then at the end of the talk, you'll see us back in the St. Mary's Auditorium wrapping up the talk with the nurses and the social workers. So I look forward to sharing this information with you. You'll see also available to you in PDF form are these handouts. Mark I is going to do its best to make these available to you, but also through PDF you can get these handouts and follow along with us. So I look forward to sharing this information with you. I was mentioning to Deborah that, and I was thinking about, you know, I've had the pleasure of working in hospital-based programs going back to the early 70s, and so I've worked with a lot of interdisciplinary treatment teams, with a lot of nurses over the years in discrete psychiatric or chemical dependency program or large medical centers, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. So when I was thinking about the work that you do as nurses and the work that some of us do as counselors or psychotherapists or psychologists or nutrition therapists or physical therapists, I was mentioning to Deborah, you know, one of the things that we all have in common, or a couple things actually, is that we encounter people when they're hurting, when they're in pain. That's when they come to us. And of course, our mission, why we became nurses and psychotherapists and physical therapists, social workers, psychologists, is because we have a sense of mission and a sense of purpose, and we have certain talents and gifts where we have felt called to be with people who are in pain, to do our best to help people in pain and to diminish or alleviate their suffering. And so I mentioned to Deborah, I said, I hope I could come on that day in March and make a contribution to the nurses and the other healthcare professionals to talk about when life hurts, how we can help guide our patients and their families to find a sense of meaning and purpose in their life, because I found in my own life personally and as a therapist that having a sense of meaning and purpose, or from an ACT perspective, living our life based on our values, makes all the difference in the world. When we have a sense, and our patients have a sense of meaning and purpose, and they live their lives according, they get clear on their values and they take action to live their life according to their values, they're able to tap into the flow of life and to the resiliency that they have within themselves. On the other hand, I think for our patients, for their families, and for us as professional healthcare providers, when we do not tap into our sense of meaning and purpose, when we do not tap into our values, we end up living what Thoreau called the life of quiet desperation. And so I shared with Deborah, I would hope to come today by taking a look at logotherapy, a therapy developed by Dr. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and philosopher from Vienna, who survived 3 years in Auschwitz and survived for 50 more years and helped thousands and tens of thousands of people. And acceptance and commitment therapy developed primarily by Dr. Stephen Hayes and some of his other colleagues like Kelly Wilson. And Steve always gives credit to the whole network of people that are involved with ACT. By looking at those therapies, then I hope to share with you some perspective and some skills and some techniques that can support you, first of all, then in helping your patients and their families tap into that sense of meaning and purpose. The other thing that I hope to provide, so there's like a dual intention. The other thing that I hope to provide was for you as a nurse, or you as a social worker, as a psychologist, as a nutritionist, a physical therapist, some tools for you and a place to stand for you as well. Because we were drawn to this work because it is meaningful to us. It's very much about an expression of who we are. However, because 1,500 hours or 2,000 hours a year, year after year, we are exposed to pain and suffering, we are vulnerable to caregiver burnout or compassion fatigue. And when that happens, our sense of meaning and purpose begins to wane. And we could be living, as Thoreau said, a life of quiet desperation, or as John Sanford, the Jungian therapist, talked about, you just show up and turn the crank. You lose the joy of the work and the relationship. I was talking with Dr. Kampiz Ali, a friend and colleague from NAMS, the other day, who's here with us today. And Dr. Kampiz Ali was saying, you know, the core thing is the relationship. The core thing is the connection. But when we have compassion fatigue or burnout and we lose our sense of meaning and purpose, we lose that connection. There was an article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal a couple of months ago, January 3rd, 2012. And it referenced a study at the University of Nevada School of Nursing. And I would change the title a little bit. The title of the article is, When Nurses Catch Compassion Fatigue, Patients Suffer. So the title is, When Nurses Catch Compassion Fatigue, Patients Suffer. I would change that a little bit for our purposes today to, When Nurses Catch Compassion Fatigue, Patients Suffer and Nurses Suffer. And in the article, it talks about compassion fatigue as a combination of secondary traumatic stress from witnessing the suffering of others and from burnout. It can lead nurses to feel sadness and despair and impair their health and well-being. Compassion fatigue can reduce nurses' empathy and lead them to dread and even avoid certain patients, raising the risk of substandard care. A 2008 study led by the University of Nevada, Reno School of Nursing found that about 12% of registered nurses were not working. Of those, more than 27% cited burnout or stressful work environments. Jamie Bugg, a 32-year-old nurse, said, "We need better ways of coping than internalizing everything." And so as we move into this talk then about when life hurts, how a sense of meaning can provide strength and direction to our patients. And we're going to be referencing acceptance and commitment therapy and logotherapy. My hope and my intention then is to provide something that we can use with our patients, but then also something that we can fall back on and that we can use for ourselves. This is an overview of our outline today. I believe I've already covered most of it, where we're going to be taking a look at logotherapy and the three ways that Frankl said human beings find meaning in their life through attitudinal values, creative values, and experiential values. Then we'll be taking a look at acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, ACT, and how through acceptance, choosing, and taking action, our patients find a foundation for their recovery and finding a new way of life. And I'm going to do my best to interweave that with the diathesis stress model of illness and recovery that Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn talks about in Full Catastrophe Living. I've chosen as our symbol for the day our rescue dog, Honey. One morning, real early, a couple of months ago, I said, "Honey, I need your help. I need you to jump up on the couch. I need you to look tired and kind of sad and hurt." And she said, "Oh no, not again. Another workshop?" Yep. So I don't know if you can see this or not, but I put a couple of Band-Aids there, and I want to say no animals were hurt in doing the photography. But I said I need to put a couple of big Band-Aids here because we're talking about when life hurts. And of course, this is where my wife Glendas said when she went to go look for a rescue dog, she says, my goodness, this has to be the dog for us. As you can see, maybe you can see in your handout or here, Honey has a heart on her side. And I said, honey, I need you to kind of lay on the couch so we can see your heart, okay? And she goes, okay, all right. And so the heart is kind of a symbol for our talk today about when life hurts from a couple of perspectives. And one, of course, is for our patients to have a sense of self-compassion. For our patients to learn to care about themselves and that they're important enough to work for themselves, to heal and to be whole and have a good life. The heart, of course, also comes from the Latin and French word cor. It means heart, to have courage. And you'll hear me talk about courage quite a bit today, about the courage that patients need to access in order to get well, especially when life hurts and especially when it really, really hurts. How important courage is. If you look back at the etymology of courage, it also goes back all the way to being a noble warrior. And that idea that when life really hurts, we need to somehow access that noble warrior within ourselves to say yes to life. And of course, the heart also has to do with compassion that we have for our patients and for their families, and hopefully that we also have for ourselves as caregivers, that we need to have compassion for ourselves. I don't know if we're going to have how far we're going to get in this. It's usually part of a 2 or 2.5 hour workshop where we have more time to dialogue, more time to do worksheets, and more time to really talk. But we've got an hour today, so I need to kind of rush through this material, and also because Mark from Mark One Productions is taping this for the State Board of Nursing. Because of that, I won't be able to take any comments or questions, which I hate to say because I love being in dialogue and talking about and exploring ideas. But I will say, if you want to call me up and talk about these things, I'd be glad to talk with you about these, because obviously I find these things very interesting. A lot of times, reading lists and bibliographies, and this is in your handout, reading lists and bibliographies are in the back and we never really pay attention to them. But I wanted to put this right up front, that this is kind of like the intellectual framework or the context that I've used over the years to develop these ideas or get these ideas that I'm sharing with you today. And so you'll see Dr. Hayes' very popular book, Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, and books by Viktor Frankl and Pema Chodron and John Kabat-Zinn. Really important books, Elizabeth Lucas. You'll also see a couple of autobiographies, a biography, and a work of fiction, Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. And these, probably except for Yolam's book on existential psychotherapy, probably all of these books I've used with patients from time to time, and the feedback is tremendous. And of course, Steve's book, Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, is really a workbook for patients to work through these concepts. And so I wanted you to be aware of these. The other thing is, if you're interested in knowing more about this topic, Steve recently had his graduate assistant, Brian, at UNR, download 14 of the new Skills for Living shows have been on Channel 8, specifically directed at acceptance and commitment therapy. Interviews with Steve and Kelly Wilson on chronic pain, chronic illness, depression, PTSD. World experts have been on the show talking about acceptance and commitment therapy. And so if you go to YouTube and under the search, if you put acceptance and commitment therapy, 14 22-minute interviews will come up. And healthcare providers are accessing that, and then they're also suggesting that their patients might want to access that too to learn more about this. So A really important concept today, you guys, as you turn to the next page, is from Dr. Hayes, where he says that life is a choice. The choice is not about whether or not to have pain, it is whether or not to live a valued, meaningful life. And one of the things in preparing for our class today, when I thought about what Steve said there, is that as healthcare providers, it's so important for us to know that pain is not the enemy. Pain is a part of life. As I was thinking about what Steve said and about our class this morning driving in, I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but I was thinking about when I did my first counseling internship at Sacred Heart Center in Skid Row in Detroit in 1973. I had a great mentor therapist. His name was Ted Church. And I was just learning to do therapy, and I just learning to do group therapy. And he was sitting in watching me do group therapy, and after group, he said, "Come on to my office." And I go, "Wow, this is great. He's going to tell me what a great job I did and everything. And I'm just going to be a great therapist one of these days and everything." And so we sat down, and Ted said, "Tom, you're a thief." I said, "Well, what do you mean I'm a thief?" He said, "You're a thief." And I was really hurt. I had no idea that he wouldn't even say, "What do you mean I'm a thief?" He said, "I was watching you in group there, Tom, and one of the things I noticed there is you were stealing people's pain away from them." And "Tom, don't you know this yet?" And I said, "No, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. I thought that's what we were supposed to do." He said, "No, when you steal people's pain away from them, you rob them of their teacher. You rob them of the lesson they need to learn to get to their next level, to transform that pain, to get to their next level of living." So he said, "Tom, you're going to need to learn, if you're going to be any kind of a counselor or therapist, you're going to need to learn to sit with your patients and tolerate their pain with empathy and compassion, and help them and develop some skills and some techniques, but help them work through their pain. But don't take it away. Because if you take it away, you'll rob them of this opportunity." And so I've tried to remember that. And of course, that's very embedded in Viktor Frankl's work and in Dr. Hayes' work of acceptance and commitment therapy, that pain is not the problem. Now, suffering is the problem. And we're going to talk about the difference between pain and suffering, and how acceptance and commitment therapy and logotherapy can help us with our patients to learn from their pain and help us diminish their suffering. Thomas Wolfe called this one of the greatest poems in Western culture. This was written about 2,500 years ago. And I'd like us to step back and think that in the last 2,500 years, there have been billions of human beings that have been on this planet and have lived this rhythm of life the same way that we are living this rhythm of life. And our patients are living this rhythm of life. There's a time to be born and a time to die, and a time to plant, and a time to pluck up, and a time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Just like the tides going in and out have for millions and millions and millions of years. And in human history, going back how many thousands or tens of thousands of years. All of our fellow human beings have lived this rhythm of life. And from what I've picked up from acceptance and commitment therapy and from logotherapy is that this is where the real life is, being in the present moment, being with what is. If we are in a time of joy, go ahead and feel that joy. Feel how wonderful it is and feel that joy. If we're in a time of mourning, go ahead and be in that time of mourning. And the same thing with our patients, to let them be where they're at. Let them experience that, not try to fix it so much. Let them be where they're at. In fact, the cause of suffering quite frequently is we want so much of the good stuff, we get into hyperintention and we keep trying to have the good stuff for us and our families and for our patients too. And it's our very hyperintention that drives our happiness away. It's like the vaudeville comedian that said, don't try to make yourself happy, because the happier you try to make yourself, the more miserable you become. Huh? And the other way that we create suffering are these more difficult experiences in human life. We try to avoid those. We try to push them away. We don't want to experience those. We don't want our kids to experience those. We don't want our patients to experience those. And so a core aspect we'll be talking about today is the idea of accepting what is as it is and being with it and being in the moment. And that is the richness of life, is being with what it is. Now, that obviously is easier said than done, isn't it? When we're talking about when life really hurts, you know, when we're at the bedside and we tell the patient, or you tell the patient, or you're there with the doctor when they tell the patient, you'll never walk again. I don't know if you'll be able to return to your job. You'll never be able to have children. I'm sorry to tell you this, and then fill in the blank. And of course, we're privy to a lot of those conversations, aren't we? This is easier said than done. And so I don't want to make light of it. One of the things that, and that's where the courage comes in. Having the courage, as Dr. Viktor Frankl said, to say yes to life in spite of everything. And another thing that he talked about is accessing the defiant power of the human spirit. To say, this is really terrible, but this will not break me. I will have this illness without this illness having me. I'm going to be bigger than my illness. I'm going to learn from this illness, or from this trauma, or from this really bad thing that's happened. So there are these moments in life that are really great and wonderful, like Snoopy and Woodstock, huh? Oh my gosh, where life is just so wonderful, and thank God for those moments in life when it's so nice. And to be there in that moment. Now, of course, a lot of our great teachers have told us that to have these moments and to be fully present in these moments and experience these, like in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly, this is the good part. We need to be able to experience the bad and the ugly. Because if we can't be present to the difficult times in our life and really experience that, we'll start to be walking dead. We will deaden ourselves, and we won't be available then when the good stuff comes along. So sometimes there are just beautiful moments like this. And other times, life is like our friend Ned for our patients and their families, and sometimes for us. The Bluebird of Happiness, long absent from his life, Ned is visited by the chicken of depression. And yes, we've all had these days, haven't we? Sometimes we've had days of this, and sometimes we've had weeks of this, haven't we? Oh my goodness, another day. Whoa. So this is what we're talking about today, is when our patients are waking up day after day or week after week, and they're looking at the chicken of depression, and where do they find the courage and the strength? What do they do to keep moving on with their life and not give up? There are a number of great stories about great human beings who have transcended their pain and suffering, aren't there? There's Helen Keller, 19 months old, stricken and not being able to hear or see, runs into Anne Sullivan, and over the years transcends that and has just a tremendous life, being an inspiration to other people, helping other people. There's Abraham Lincoln, who grew up in a family of people who suffered with what we would call today mental illness, who suffered from depression. Abraham Lincoln grew up feeling depressed, being depressed, When he was in his early 20s, the woman that he was in love with died. And he was so stricken with grief and so depressed, he walked in the woods around Springfield, Illinois, day after day after day after day. And people were afraid that he was going to kill himself. And he said at that time, he said, "I'm the most miserable man in the whole world." Obviously, he transcended that. He got some support from his friends, and he got an idea that was bigger than his life. And he said he wanted to be a part of a freedom movement. He wanted to be a part of a society that created equality. So we'll be talking about that today, this idea about self-transcendent values, creative values, and how healing and how important that is for our patients. Michael J. Fox has a great story. Some of you might have, he's got 3 autobiographical pieces out. He had everything, didn't he? I mean, he couldn't make movies and television shows fast enough. He had a beautiful wife, a couple of beautiful kids. He found in his early 30s that he was beginning to shake, and he didn't know what that was. And he was so scared, he started drinking. And then he started drinking his brains out, as we talk about in acceptance and commitment therapy, an avoidance strategy to avoid that, or being an ostrich. I don't want to deal with this, so I'm just going to drink. And then Michael J. Fox ended up getting some help through Alcoholics Anonymous. They helped him save his life. And since that time, he's been helping other alcoholics, and obviously he's gotten involved, again, in a self-transcendent activity to help with research and legislation, help people that are suffering with Parkinson's. And then here's Scout Bassett, a beautiful story. Scout, at the age of 1 year old, it seems as they're trying to piece this story together, was left on the doorstep of an orphanage in China with the bottom part of her right leg gone. They don't know who left her there. As they've tried to look at the evidence throughout the years, it seems like there was a big chemical burn that somehow burned off most of her right leg. As Scout tells it, she was in this orphanage for 6 more years where she suffered neglect and abuse, near starvation. If there would have been such a thing as child labor laws, violation of multiple child labor laws, terribly exploited, and a couple from Michigan went to China looking for a child to adopt. And they saw Scout, and they brought her back to Michigan. And they basically loved her back to life. And she developed an interest in sports and a love of sports, and you can see her here with her prosthetic. And she ended up being a triathlete at UCLA. And she's still a triathlete as a young woman. So there are some tremendous stories. By the way, I frequently will recommend these books to my patients to read because they're so inspirational. So is Viktor Frankl's story, of course, surviving 3 years in Auschwitz. And a lot of times people will say, you know what? I guess if they can do that, I guess I can do it. So, but what about that? If they can do it, I guess I can do it. And this is the rest of us here. You know, the rest of us that aren't going to have probably any heroic stories, but we're gonna hurt. What do we do? Can we access the same way that Helen Keller did, and the same way that Abraham Lincoln, and the same way that Scout did, and Michael J. Fox? Can the rest of us access that? And I think you know from the patients that you've worked with over the years that there are patients who do. And then there are patients who don't. But we want to talk today about what we can do to help patients access those things that they accessed. And again, going back to last autumn after Deborah and I had talked about this talk, I spent some time on a Sunday afternoon talking with my wife about these themes in our life, how they've been in our family, and as Glenda was talking about some health challenges that she's had, and a little note that I left her once upon a time. she's a very private person, but she said, you know, if it can help make the point that common, regular people can have health challenges and somehow use some of the things that she's picked up about acceptance and commitment therapy and logotherapy and these principles over the years, she said she'd be glad to share a little bit of her story. So we'll be taking a look at that later, about how just regular common people, not just a bunch of heroes, can use this. About a year and a half ago, through the patients that I work with in my private practice, and then also patients that I work with through the intensive outpatient program at Northern Nevada Adult Mental Health, I wanted to do my best to come up with a little tool that they could use every day to remind themselves of the basic principles of ACT and logotherapy. Something they could access and help them with their perspective and ground them. And so I wrote this about a year and a half ago, and most of the patients that I work with, I asked them to read this 3 times a day. And if you don't do it 3 times a day, can you do it once a day? And if you don't do it once a day, can you try it at least 3 or 4 times a week? But at least we try this. And the feedback from patients has been very positive. They found that this little tool can be very helpful. And I think this will tie in with Marcia Houghton's presentation at the end of the day about mindfulness with patients. And so the feedback has been good. And again, Steve might want to critique this, but I did my best to try to capture the essence of acceptance and commitment therapy and the essence of logotherapy for these patients so that they can get grounded and have focus. And I'd like us to go through this meditation together. And I asked a friend and colleague of mine, Ann Wallace, who's here today, I've asked her if she would please guide us through this meditation. Ann is a certified psychiatric nurse, and she's also a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. And Ann and I have worked together for many years, and Ann said that she would be willing to guide us through this meditation. So thank you, Ann.
Okay, first of all, we're going to do a meditation. So let's everybody just just relax, get comfortable, put your feet on the floor, and just focus on your breathing. Just close your eyes or open them, however you're comfortable, and take some slow, deep breaths. In through your nose, out through your nose. Slow, deep breaths. Accept what is as it is. Accept and allow your thoughts and feelings to emerge and just be there. The ones you like and the ones you don't like. Take a few deep breaths and just let your thoughts and feelings be there. Take a few more slow, deep breaths and let your thoughts and your feelings be there. Not judging them, not falling into the trap of attempting to avoid or control them. Let them be. Remember, to accept them does not mean we like them or the situation. Just let your thoughts and your feelings be there. Let the situation be there. And then settle into accepting what is as it is. If you're continuing to have a hard time accepting what is, go ahead and accept that you have a hard time accepting. Next, focus on your values. What's important to you? Is there something about this you want to change? Your perspective, the situation? Can you change it? Develop a plan, a strategy to make the changes you discern would be good. Engage in Nike therapy. Just do it. Take positive, assertive action. Next, if you can't change the situation today, let go. Let it go for today. Just let it be. Let it go and move on. Focus on other things you value. Letting go is also a form of taking action. Later, if you feel the desire to change it, and the time seems right, develop and plan a strategy to make the change you discern would be good. Engage in Nike therapy. Just do it. Take positive, assertive action.
I would suggest as the core of what I'm suggesting is what we want to share with our patients who are in pain. And so let's go ahead and turn the page, and this is John Kabat-Zinn from his book, Full Catastrophe Living. And this is the diagram that he uses to kind of explain the diathesis stress model. There are stressors in our patients' lives, in our lives. There are stressors when life hurts. Death, we have a chronic physical or mental illness. A family member has a chronic illness. Chronic pain, loss of a dream, being abandoned or rejected, being betrayed, loss of a career, earning power, emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, a traumatic life event, loss of faith in life or God or ourselves. And then, of course, another one that I wish I would have added here is existential guilt. And that's the pain that our patients or that we have to live with when we make a decision and that decision ends up harming ourselves or someone else. So these are stressors that we encounter. And, of course, so many of you are nurses here, and others of you know more about the diathesis stress model than I do. But of course, what we find is we have an acute reaction. We can begin to intervene when we're feeling ourselves having that alarm reactivity. We can begin to do our mindfulness. We can call and ask to speak with a friend about our distress. We can journal. We can exercise. We can take a nap. We can begin to intervene there. But again, Anne was talking about in the meditation being aware, being present. If we're not aware that we're having this reaction, we're going to get into chronic hyperarousal. We're going to see high blood pressure, arrhythmias, sleep disorders, chronic headaches, backaches, and anxiety. If our patients are paying attention, if we're paying attention, a red flag is going to come up and say, whoa, 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 I need to be mindful here. I need to gather myself up. I need to either change the things I can change or accept the things I cannot change. I need to get back to balance. But As we know, if our patients don't pay attention to that, or if we don't pay attention to that, we'll get into maladaptive coping. Maladaptive coping is looking for love in all the wrong places. We start thinking that a cigarette or a cup of coffee or a six-pack or a joint or some methamphetamine or some gambling or 75 hours of work or something will take this pain away. We get into maladaptive coping, which provides some temporary relief, but actually it ends up causing more problems, doesn't it? And then what happens is our patients get into breakdown. And that, of course, is what the Diathesis stress model is, that we all have a certain amount of resiliency, like this rubber band. And as long as our patients take good care of themselves, or we take good care of ourselves, we can deal with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, and we'll keep bouncing back and bouncing back. But what happens, though, if day after day after day after day, stress after stress, and we're not recuperating, the well is running dry. Our patients aren't doing the things they need to do to take care of themselves. Or we aren't. Just like this rubber band, if I were to continue to stretch this, it will snap at its weakest point. And that's what the Diathesis stress model is, and that's what's happened with our patients. Some combination of a genetic predisposition and a stressor has given rise to this trauma or this illness, or problems that arose from maladaptive coping behaviors. And this cycle will continue, and that's why it's one of the things that's so painful for us is we see our patients continue to recycle, continue to have problems going from one hospital to the next, one clinic to the next, one doctor. It's this problem. And so, of course, we want to know, because our mission is we are healers and teachers. We're there to help alleviate suffering and help people be healthy. What can we do in this case? And I would like to mention there can also be other types of stressors. And I'm going to be referring to this later. And that's sometimes even when we're doing the very best we can to take care of ourselves, like the women in the 90s who did hormone replacement therapy and found out that it may have caused their breast cancer. That's a stressor too that can enter the body and have an influence in people's lives. So what can our patients do, and what can we do with our patients? If you turn the page, you'll see here on the first page where it was the stress page, when life hurts, it's like this, isn't it? It's like the bottom falls out, there's no place to stand. And there's nothing to hold on to. That's what our patients are feeling. When they're told, you'll never walk again, you'll never have a child, you'll never be able to return to work. And what our patients need at that time is a place to stand. And again, I'm having to be very quick right now, so I apologize, but I want to get through this. So Viktor Frankl talks about attitudinal values, gives patients a place to stand. And attitudinal values basically is facing our fate without flinching. Facing our fate without flinching, which is what Dr. Steve Hayes means when he talks about accepting life as it is. The good, the bad, and the ugly, accepting it. The core, attitudinal values, saying yes to life in spite of everything. Accessing the defiant power of the human spirit. I'm going to have this disease isn't going to have me. Or like the paraplegic psychologist that I met at a logotherapy conference in Dallas 20 years ago said, I broke my neck isn't going to break me. That's what we're talking about here, is accessing that level of courage. And it gives our patients a place to stand. Viktor Frankl talked about the unheard cry for meaning, that frequently physicians, nurses, psychotherapists, we come up with a treatment plan and we suggest this or that, but we forget about the importance of meaning in our patients' lives. We don't hear it. And Dr. Andrew Weil and Dr. Dean Ornish And I'm paraphrasing here, as you can see. But what they said is basically, if someone has no meaning or purpose in their life, what good does it do to say, why don't you exercise, eat healthy, stop smoking? He said, they're not going to do that. Why would I do that if my life is meaningless, if I feel like my life is over? So Dean Ornish, Andrew Weil, Steve Hayes, all these folks right here, talk about the importance of helping our patients find a sense of meaning in life. These are the things, and I don't have time to read them, but as you read through them quickly, these are the things that we hear as nurses and psychotherapists and social workers. And when we hear that, what we need to hear is this person is dying to find some meaning in their life. What can I say to help them have a foundation for their recovery? So we want to, and this is the first way then that Frankl talked about people find meaning in their life, is through attitudinal values. And attitudinal values very much is about that we always have a choice. As Steve said, we don't have a choice about the pain, but we do have a choice if we're going to live a meaningful life based on our values. So we do have a choice that many times bad things do happen to good people, don't they? Bad things do. Now, what are we going to do about it? As Rabbi Kushner said here when he wrote that book after his teenage son died, and he grappled with this as a rabbi. I've done everything right. Why have you taken my son? And what Rabbi Kushner came to and what he shares with us is, when these things happen, the questions that we want to ask, and we want to guide our patients to ask this, is not why did this happen to me, but now that this happened to me, what can I do about it? Now, an important thing for us, we don't want to be too heroic here with our patients. Because sometimes, understandably, if we come in too soon and we say, well, if it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger, they're going to throw a bedpan at us, right? So you don't just come right in with that stuff, right? So one of the key things, there's some really good trans-theoretical research that shows patients who have left therapy, and they said, what really helped you in therapy? And of course, I'm moving this over then into the bedside nursing and other types of nursing too. What are the things that really made a difference for you? And there are 4 things that patients said made the therapy effective for them. They said, I felt listened to, I felt acknowledged, I felt validated, and I was offered hope. And that's what we want to do. That's what empathy is, of course, is listening, acknowledging, validating. I know you're in pain. You must be hurting right now. I've had other patients that have gone through the same thing, and they've shared with me that they've experienced some of the very same things. I know you're really hurting right now. Listening, acknowledging, like Dr. Campiz Ali said, being connected, being present. And like the Wall Street Journal article said, if we can't be with our patient's pain, we're not going to be able to be there with them, are we? Listening, acknowledging, validating. And this is where empathy comes in, offering hope then. I hear what you're saying, and so many other patients have been through this, and I've seen them then go to the men's prostate recovery group, or the breast cancer support group, or the stroke recovery group, or the 12-step group. And they found help for themselves, and you know what? They've been able to help other people. That's where the hope part comes in. So listening, acknowledging, and validating can open up the door where our clients can, again, the idea of having a place to stand. That's the first way Frankl said patients find meaning, and I think that's what Dr. Hayes is talking about as one of the aspects of acceptance. So with true acceptance then, we need to have what E.E. Cummings referred to as the courage to grow up and be who we really are. And this is where illness can be a real opportunity. It can be a transforming life event where our patients begin, it's a wake-up call. Our patients, they tell us, don't they? Maybe we've experienced this ourselves. We begin to look at life differently. Other priorities, maybe truer and deeper priorities, begin to emerge. So if we turn to the page on acceptance, and this is important, I think, where Steve talks about accepting your pain is a step toward ridding your suffering. Now, quite honestly, I used to think pain and suffering were the same thing. I thought they were interchangeable and they were the same thing. But when it was very helpful to me going back to 1999 when I was first exposed to acceptance and commitment therapy, and I started learning from Steve and Kelly and other people that pain is one thing and suffering is another. Pain is what happens when life hurts, and suffering is what happens when I can't accept the fact that I'm in pain. Marcia Linehan, a colleague of Steve's, another great psychologist, who also is a wounded healer. As a young woman, she spent 2 years in a psychiatric hospital because of her pain and her self-destructiveness. And she's come out on the other end and helped tens of thousands of people. And what Marcia says is, radical acceptance is the way out of hell. It means letting go of fighting reality. Acceptance is the way to turn suffering that cannot be tolerated into pain that can be tolerated. So I hope everybody got a finger trap today. I hope everybody got a finger trap. If you didn't, Gail's got some up there. And this is a great little teaching tool that I picked up from Steve. It's in his book, and he's talked about it with me, and so I use it with my patients. In fact, all the patients who graduate from the intensive outpatient program at Adult Mental Health Services, when they graduate, they get a finger trap. Because they've learned over the 16 weeks of therapy and then aftercare that the more we struggle with our pain, the more we trap ourselves. Now, last month, when Steve did the television show with me and I gave him a set of these finger traps, he said, geez, these are cheap, Tom. I could rip these apart in a minute. So, yes, you do have the cheap ones, you guys. Don't rip them apart. Because if you have to buy hundreds of these things, you don't want the expensive ones, okay? But this idea about struggling and not struggling, about accepting what is. Accepting what is. Now, I'm going to have to run through this much more quickly than I ever wanted to. This is on our kitchen window. It's next to our kitchen window. My wife Glenda has this set up. It's what she sees in the morning when she wakes up and comes out to the kitchen. It's a woman really celebrating life with a tree that has hearts in it, and the hearts are down. And this is one of her still lifes that she did many, many years ago. And right underneath that is a note that I wrote to Glenda. And again, I know I need to be quick with this. When Glenda was 50 years old, after many mammograms, it turned out to be okay. She was told that she had breast cancer. Consultation with her physician, she had a lumpectomy and 6 weeks of radiation therapy. She really took a hit at that time. Body image, being a woman, identity. Anytime any patient has disfiguring surgery, that affects a person. But she got help from Anne, a lot of other people. She bounced back, continued with her artwork. Our youngest son was still in high school. She was a mom still, doing her artwork, taking care of John. First year, second year, third year, all these mammograms are coming back fine. Fifth year, no problem. Of course, back in those days, 5 years was kind of a benchmark, and if you didn't, you had escaped to a great degree any more breast cancer if you escaped that. So we celebrated, and we thought how wonderful this is. In year 6 and year 7, then in that year, they found out that she had thyroid cancer, and she had to have a thyroidectomy, which was very traumatic. The surgery itself, the scar in her throat. Bouncing back from that, our daughter, Rachel, had come back from Hong Kong. She helped her out. Anne's one of her really good friends. Anne helped her out. Other people helped her out. She bounced back. She got back into her artwork. Continued to have mammograms, year 7, year 8, year 9, year 10. Year 10, oh no. She was told she had breast cancer. So she really took a hit. It's like the floor's falling through, right? So she had the mastectomy. She was going to the breast cancer support group. She was grateful she didn't have to do chemotherapy like so many other women. But she was really devastated. She was just nothing to hold on to, the ground's falling through. One morning I had to leave for the office, early in the morning. And of course it was weighing heavy on my heart. So before I left that morning, I just wrote a little note. I said, it's all okay and it's going to be okay. And she was reminding me of this when we were talking last autumn, getting ready for this talk. And she said, Tom, I don't really like you doing this, but if it'll help other people understand these concepts, okay. So Glenda talked about how she woke up and she went out to the island in the kitchen and she looked at that. And in the midst of her struggle with accepting what is as it is, she said, okay, if this is what I have to, if this is the way life is, okay. And this is what happens with our patients, where through this struggle, eventually, hopefully, they'll come to a time of accepting what is as it is. And then from there, from that acceptance then, she got back into her art. She started taking more classes. She started working with a tutor and really developing as an artist. Of course, when we say yes to life, doors open up that we didn't even know about. A number of women who are involved in Art Town, and they have an art show every July, and they raise money for the Komen Foundation. They asked Glenda to be a part of that. So she's been a part of that, creating her art and then moving her art out into the community and sharing what she receives with the Komen Foundation so that other women can be helped. That's the self-transcendent quality that occurs. So again, that's an example that everybody doesn't have to be Michael J. Fox or Scout Bassett or Abraham Lincoln or Helen Keller, but that our patients can access this and so can we. Okay, so we are transitioning from the page on acceptance, where we talked about the finger trap and how important it is to just lean into and accept what is as it is. And we are now, back in the Mark 1 studios, we are now on this page, which in your handouts is page 12. And you'll see in the upper right-hand corner now, we are talking about choosing and committing, which is the C part of acceptance and commitment therapy, about choosing and committing. One of the things that's really important for us to think about when we're working with our patients around the idea of choosing is the solution-oriented therapists talk about we want to help people envision a really great life for themselves, a kind of life that they would really like. And they, in solution-oriented therapy, they talk about it's like when you're ordering a restaurant meal. And as you're thinking about the meal that you want to order, your mouth begins to water because you can taste the food as you're thinking about it. The same thing is true with our patients when we're talking with them about envisioning their life and choosing the kind of life that they want to live. What are your values? What is important to you? What do you want your life to be about? You'll see on page 13 of your handouts this schema from the book on acceptance and commitment therapy with anxiety. And you will see that there are mountains up here, and the mountains are the vision, the life that we want to lead. You'll also see, though, that sometimes we get sidetracked and we circle around and around. This is our anxiety. This is our fear. This is our avoidance and control. By not accepting what is and not saying yes to life, we get caught in this circle where we continue to do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So with the C part of acceptance and commitment therapy, we're looking at choosing the kind of life that we want to live and then making a commitment to live that life and getting out of the vicious cycle and moving toward the mountains, moving toward our values. You'll see there on page 14 then, and this page is entitled Vision, Decision, and Action. What is the vision that you have for the kind of life you want to live? Making a decision to become that kind of person, and then taking the action to create that. That's vision, decision, and action. I like to call this page, when we're thinking about the kind of person that we want to become, I like to call this, I want to become the person my dog thinks I am. What are the very best values we have? What kind of life do we want to lead? And you'll see that there are a number of characteristics here that we ask our patients to go through, and that we ourselves might take a look at these values, like being compassionate, being responsible, having greater intimacy in our life, having more creativity, more honesty, more loyalty. And so we ask our patients to spend some time looking at these qualities and defining for themselves, what kind of a person do I want to become? What do I need to do to become that person? What barriers stand in the way? And what do I need to do to overcome those barriers? So this is the first part about living the kind of life that we want to live. You'll see on this handout now, which is page 15, and you see the mother with the child. And you can see how much the mother loves the child. And you can see the child looking out into the world about the kind of person that he wants to become. This is, in logotherapy terms, these are the creative values, what we give to life. What are our talents and gifts, and what do we want to give to life? You'll see here Viktor Frankl's quote, where he says, a person should not ask what he may expect from life, but rather that life expects something from him. So this important transition that we make, where we say, not what can I get from life, but what can I give to life? This is what we want to ask our patients to do. This is what Abraham Lincoln did. This is what Michael J. Fox did. This is what Scout Bassett did, that we talked about earlier. This is what Viktor Frankl himself did after he survived Auschwitz. And he says that human existence is always pointing outward into what can we give to life. So this is something that we want to reinforce with our patients. Now that life hurts and you're suffering, but you're accepting what is, and you're wondering, now what do I do with my life? We're asking them, what can you do in a creative way? What talents and gifts do you have to give back to life, to make life more meaningful? Now, a lot of times, and you'll see this is on page 16 of your handouts, with this picture of this beautiful pond and Mount Rose in the background. And you'll see there's a poem there from the Tao Te Ching. And the poem is about the idea of the ripple effect. Like just with this pond, where we might take a stone and throw it out into the pond. And there's this little small ripple, but it begins to ripple outward. And after several seconds, and maybe even a minute, as it ripples outward, the ripples are long-lasting, and they're gigantic ripples all over the course of the lake. We want to reinforce with our patients, don't think that what you do has to be a big thing. What little things can you do to make life a little bit better for people that you love or people that you come in contact with? What little things can you do as you do your volunteer work or as you do your work in life? It does not have to be a big deal. This idea of the ripple effect, that we can have long-lasting effects that are positive in the world just by making little small differences in the lives of other people. And you will see this. We talked earlier about my wife Glenda, who, as she recovered from breast cancer surgery, and she developed her art, and she then began to show her work at Art Town. And then she and the other artists would take the proceeds from their work and contribute them to the Komen Foundation to help other women that are having problems with breast cancer. And so you'll see this photograph here of Glenda at Art Town and some of her artwork in the background. Now again, it was not a big deal. It's not like life-changing, but with the work that Glenda and the other artists were doing, first of all, by being some of them cancer survivors and other illness problems, being out there and saying yes to life, doing their artwork, and then sharing the proceeds with other women who may be suffering. This is the idea of creative values. This is the idea of the ripple effect, making a little difference in the lives of other people. You will see also then on page 17, and this is from Dr. Viktor Frankl, and this is called Creative Values. And this is a worksheet that when you look at this, you'll see these are certain questions that you can ask of your patients. And then as wounded healers, we also want to ask ourselves about this, about what are my goals? What are my ambitions? What has held me back from being this kind of person that I want to be? What are my assets and my strengths that I can do to manifest these creative values in life? Again, what I want to give to the world. And then lastly, we want to take a look at what obstacles are there. What things might get in my way that I may need to transcend, or I might need to ask other people for help and support. So that's creative values from logotherapy. You'll see on page 18 this photograph of these daisies under the pine tree. And if you don't, unless you look really closely, you might glance at this and think there are 2 daisies there, but actually there are 3. And so there's that quote there from Ferris Bueller, where he says, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. And it's just like this photograph here. This is about you must be present to win. We want to take our time, and this is experiential values. This is the experiential values part of logotherapy. Creative values is what we give to the world. Experiential values is what the world gives to us. What are those moments in our life where we say, yes, this is good. I like this. I enjoy this. As we're talking about this right now, I'm thinking about a woman that I worked with who was severely depressed for many years. And when she was coming to see me in therapy, we started talking about experiential values and what are the things that you like to do? And she says, I love to be out in nature. I love being up in the pine trees in the Sierras and seeing the sunlight come through in the shadows and smelling the pine needles. And I said, that sounds wonderful. When was the last time you did that? And she said, it was 3 years ago. And I said, holy mackerel, please get up there. This is engagement then, experiential values. You must be present to win. Please get up there into the forest and walk through the Sierra Nevadas and have that experience, because this will be very important to you, not only to have meaning in your life, but also to overcome your depression. And so she started doing Nike therapy. She forced herself to get out of her apartment and to get up into the Sierra Nevadas. And this was very much a part of her healing as she overcame her depression, and she had a sense of meaning in life. So again, Frankl wasn't just saying, what do you give to life, but also, what do we let life give to us? And you'll see here on page 19 on this worksheet, in this middle paragraph, it lists so many things that we can do. Canoeing, photography, going for walks, doing artwork, listening to music, playing music. So we want to ask our patients, what are some things that maybe in their previous life before they got sick, what did you like to do? And can you summon the courage to get out there and do that again? Or we might ask them, are there things that you always dreamed about doing that you've wanted to do? And you've said, gee, I might really like that. We want to encourage them to get out and do that and experience that. These are things that bring meaning to our lives. So that is experiential values. So now with logotherapy, we've talked about attitudinal values, the foundation upon which we stand, the creative values where we give something to life, and then experiential values, what we let life give to us. You will also see in your handouts, and this is on page 20, and this is from Dr. Stephen Hayes' book, Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, and which again is a highly recommended book. And these are more concrete worksheets than what we saw with Dr. Viktor Frankl. You'll see in each of these life dimensions, Steve is asking us, what are your values? when it comes to couples or intimate relationships? What are your values when it comes to family life? When it comes to social relationships? When it comes to employment? When it comes to education and training? When it comes to recreation and spirituality? Citizenship and health and well-being? And so Steve asked us to take a look at all these different areas of our lives. What are your values? Then once we've identified our values, what are the goals? And this is on page 21. What are the goals then? Very concretely, how are we going to manifest those values in our life? Then what actions are we going to do very concretely to make that happen? And then lastly, just like Viktor Frankl asked us to do, Steve Hayes asked us to take a look at what are the barriers, the things that will get in our way, the challenges that we're going to have to meet. So now we're getting into acceptance and commitment therapy. And again, this is the C part of choosing and committing to this new life that we want to live. You will also see now on pages 22 and 23 and 24, now we're getting into the area of resiliency and self-care. This is so important for our patients. It's so important for us. You'll see on this stress-hardy lifestyle, it's actually 2 pages. These are 18 low-cost, no-cost ways of developing stress hardiness and developing resiliency, having the strength to deal with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. You will also see then, as we continue to look through these handouts, on page 24, this is called Develop Your Resiliency. More ideas that we can share with our patients and that we can use ourselves as wounded healers, things that we can do to take good care of ourselves. You will see on page 25, this is from Lawrence Gonzalez's book, Deep Survival. What are those qualities that people have to survive difficult times, whether they're lost in the Andes Mountains or in the Amazon River, or they have cancer or heart disease or other things in life where life has hurt them? Lawrence Gonzalez has some great ideas that you can find here and share with your patients, and we can use ourselves on page 25. Now, as we continue along here, we've talked about acceptance, we've talked about choose and commit, and now when you turn to page 26, you will see now we are looking at take action. This is the last thing, acceptance and choosing and committing, and now taking action. And there are some key themes here about Nike therapy. And Nike therapy is just do it. And I like to use that term with my patients because often they've gone through analysis paralysis. They've been paralyzed by their stress. They've been paralyzed by the shock of their illness. They've been paralyzed by anxiety. They've been paralyzed by depression. And they can't just bring themselves to do it. And so after they've been thinking about what do I want to do, I will say do Nike therapy to summon up the energy and the courage to say yes to life and get out and take that step and do it. Now, Steve Hayes brought up a very good point, and he was a little reluctant when he heard me talking about Nike therapy. And I'm glad he was reluctant about that, because that brings us back to this other term, which is willingness. And willingness means to be willing to take some action, being gentle with ourselves, having self-compassion, not being judgmental, not being perfectionistic, knowing that change is very much about 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. This also is where courage comes up, and you'll see this on the sheet. And we talked about courage earlier, where the heart represents self-compassion. It represents compassion for other people. And heart also means courage, saying yes to life in spite of everything. The other key theme is about having patience, knowing that we cannot change our circumstances or change ourselves around just like that. That it's 1 step in front of the other, 1 step in front of the other, and then one day at a time, we create a new life for ourselves. You'll see on page 28, and this is a very important topic, where we talk about having an attitude of gratitude. Now, it is great those days when we feel gratitude, isn't it? It's great. But a lot of days we don't feel gratitude, especially when we've been suffering. And so it's important to remember that gratitude is an attitude. And so we may not feel like it some days, but we can still manifest gratitude. You'll see down at the bottom of this worksheet, we would encourage our patients to list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that they have to be grateful for that day. And most patients that I've worked with, even when they are suffering terribly, they can still say, you know what, there are 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things that I do feel grateful for today. So we will ask them to list those. The next thing we ask them to do is express that and say, you know what, I am grateful for this. I have a roof over my head. I have medications. I have food. I have a family member who cares about me. I have a good doctor. List some basic things that we have to be grateful for. And then the next thing that they will read on the worksheet, and you can feel free to copy these worksheets and give them to your patients, by the way. The next thing that's very important then in bringing full circle this idea of taking action, an attitude of gratitude is, I've been blessed in my life. There are things that I have to be grateful for. Now, what can I do to pass it on? What can I do to pay it forward? What can I do to make a positive difference in someone else's life? By taking that action, that allows us to really deeply feel this idea of having an attitude of gratitude, and that not only am I blessed in my life, but I'm doing things to make someone else's life better. That really fulfills our heart in a deep and meaningful way. Now we are going to return to the last piece that we showed at St. Mary's, where we talk about devotion and we talk about that little story about the little boy who's on the seashore and he's picking up starfish. But I do want to share these other 2 things with you because I think it does, this brings it full circle to what we were reading about being willing to be with our clients or patients or not. This was circling around the internet last autumn, and I said, I love this. I love this. Just as a human being, and I love it as a therapist. Lily, a Great Dane who's been blind since a medical condition required she have both of her eyes removed. For the past 5 years, Madison has been her sight. The two have been inseparable. I love that. And I think that's what our call is, and that's what our mission is to be there, as Dr. Campiz Ali was saying. It's the connection, to be there with our clients. So along with being there, as we're tolerating their pain, lastly, and this really is the last thing, I promise. This is bordering on being disrespectful. Living within our limitations and tapping into our mission. I love this little story by Lauren Isley. And I think this is so helpful to many nurses that I've worked with over the years. I've shared this with them and they'll just say, yeah, I like that. I'm going to use that. I want to remember that. That'll help me stay focused and grounded and remember that how much love I have and how much I want to make a difference, but I can only make so much of a difference, and I need to be at peace with that. One day a man was walking along the beach when he noticed a boy picking things up and throwing them into the ocean. Approaching the boy, he asked, "What are you doing?" The youth replied, "Throwing starfish back into the ocean. The surf is up, the tide is going out, and they're left on the beach to die." "Son," he said, "don't you realize there are miles and miles of beach and thousands of starfish? You can't make a difference." After listening politely, the boy bent down, picked up another starfish, and threw it back into the ocean. Smiling at the man, the boy said, "Just made a difference to that one." Thank you very much. It's been great being with you.